So, as Felicity said, so I run my family business, which is Cleevely Motors, which has been in Cheltenham for the last 60 years, nearly. We service and maintain all makes and models of car, and we're really proud that we're an independent company with family values, and trust and respect is at the core of our business. And we'll do anything we can to help the town and its residents. And around 4 years ago, I looked to being involved in electric cars, as I had or have still a solar on my home here. We've added to our solar since. We've got battery storage, we've got rainwater harvesting. So I'm very involved in renewable technologies, and I've invested heavily not only at my home but also at my workplace as well. Our new workshops in Lansdown Industrial Estate, we have 30 kilowatts of solar on the roof there as well. So we are very heavy and really behind the new technology and everything about renewables. But back to how I got to this point, that around 4 years ago it was, I wanted to develop my own professionalness, look for the next challenge that's going to be involved with my family business. What do we need to learn? How do we stay abreast of modern technology? What's the next sort of line of mobility? And also at the same time, my wife was doing backwards and forwards to the school run. The car never got warm, engines were poor, so it just wasn't good for the car to never really travel anywhere, any distance. And I looked to EV for those reasons. What's going to be best for the environment? What's going to be best mode of form of transport for us? So it was sort of two-stage really. It was about economy, so our own sort of household bills, what's going to be cheap to run, and free fuel off of a house having solar seemed like a good hook in the first place. And then also what was good for the car, and the environment, and traveling around zero emissions, keeping those emissions away from schools, which I found was really important as well. And seeing as my wife only does round town short journeys, commuting, things like that, it just seemed crazy to drive between Churchdown where we live and Cheltenham, and where school is, producing emissions when we really didn't have to. So went to our local Renault and Nissan dealers to learn about electric cars and to purchase one, and nobody there knew anything about them at all. And at the time, these were the two leading manufacturers of fairly affordable uh, um, electric vehicles. And I thought, well, if they're not going to do anything to promote and sell these vehicles, then we'll have to do it ourselves. I completely had fallen in love with the technology once I purchased it as well. Driving an electric car is absolutely fantastic experience. Um, Tomorrow night I have a 250 nearly round trip planned to Dorset and back, just to drop my mother-in-law off, and I have no qualms about doing that in my own personal EV, and I trust the infrastructure, and I know that even after a day's work, I'll be able to get home after that kind of journey, not fully fresh because there's a lot of concentration in driving, but a lot fresher than I would be if I was driving a petrol or diesel equivalent, such as the nature of driving an EV. It just allows you to relax a bit more, and it's just a more pleasurable driving experience, in my opinion. So, once as a company, we really threw ourselves into electric vehicles. I created a separate business to run alongside the traditional family business that was specifically with electric vehicles, and we threw ourselves in. We joined EV owners groups. We've been to lots of trade events and lots of public events where other EV owners are. We really learnt about the whole community, what was involved in EV ownership, what people wanted to know from their garage, how we could benefit those looking uh, to transition into EVs, and what they wanted to learn. And so we've been able to base talks like this to other community groups and to various other groups who want to know more about electric vehicles, based on what we've learned in 4 very short years. And our business is constantly learning, constantly developing. So enough about what I do, and a bit more about EVs. If nobody has an electric vehicle, if you do have an electric vehicle, and you know this stuff, then I apologise for going over it again, but I feel it's kind of important to cover the basics. So what we talk about, what we drive, are pure electric vehicles. So battery electric vehicles, or BEVs as they are sort of known as, but there are various forms of electrification on vehicles. Electrification is a very broad term you might hear people in the trade talk about, and so the differences between, so we start with petrol, diesel. I'm sure everyone knows what they're about, but then you can get mild hybrid systems that run alongside. Now, a hybrid that is just it runs off petrol or diesel is an electric motor that sits in the transmission and has a very small battery, maybe 5 to 8 kilowatt hours, and that will just it doesn't have a way of being charged. It just uses regeneration. So that's regenerative braking, where it uses the energy when the vehicle is slowing down, recovers that and puts it back into the battery for use up to around 20 mile an hour. So good for around town things. Hybrids are okay for. They just propel the vehicle without turning the engine on up to a certain speed or after a certain distance, and it's a good stepping stone. It's a good way in. But our preferred method if is the next stage, and how I actually started. So we got my wife's fully electric vehicle 4 years ago, and then I changed my own vehicle to a plug-in hybrid. So that is it has a petrol engine or diesel engine still, but it has a slightly bigger battery, and it allows you to plug into your house, charge it from your mains, and run for a slightly longer distance, so maybe 20 miles or so on pure electric power. A lot of them have switchable, so you can choose between storing that battery energy. The idea behind that is zero emission zones that are increasing over time now. So we're hearing that Oxford, Birmingham, Bristol, they'll all have zero emission zones where you have to pay a fee to get into that zone, unless you have something like a plug-in hybrid vehicle where you can save that battery energy until you get into the zero emission zone and run on battery when you're there. So that's the difference of a plug-in hybrid is exactly that. It allows you to plug into your mains, nice and cheap to run. And I actually found, whilst I had a plug-in hybrid, that I could do my daily commuting purely on the battery. During the depths of winter, I could get home and back quite easily, even on a full battery, and just charge each and every night. In the summer, I could actually do pretty much 2 days before the engine would kick back in again. The engine will only kick in and help propel the vehicle under extreme loads, or once that battery is depleted enough and needs to recharge. Then it can also switch and to use that engine to charge the battery back up again. So it's all very clever technology. Why did I move away from a plug-in hybrid? That was because although it towed a caravan, which is the reason why I bought it in the first place, so that I could tow a big caravan and go on holiday with my families, I actually found out I was getting really frustrated when the engine would kick in. I didn't want that engine to run, and that's how I personally knew I was ready to go full electric. Now, one of the questions we get all the time is, can I tow a caravan with my electric vehicle? And a lot of them, unfortunately, the answer is no. But my own personal decision, I decided that I didn't go on a holiday enough to justify keeping that plug-in hybrid when it would frustrate me the way it did. And I was better off shot of it. And if I wanted to keep the caravan, I would hire a vehicle that tows my caravan on the times that I go on holiday. As it was, we made a family decision that we didn't need the caravan after all, and we bought a tent, and that all fits now in my battery electric vehicle that I drive each and every day. And I absolutely love driving it. I don't think I'll ever get bored, which is why I volunteered a 250-mile round trip tomorrow night. So they're the sort of basics. Costs feature quite heavily. I haven't got really up-to-date figures, but a rough idea that a petrol or diesel car will cost around 16p a mile to run. That's based on costs of fuel, costs of maintenance and things like that factored in as well. A plug-in hybrid, you can around about half that, and then a pure battery electric vehicle is as low as 2p a mile to run. Why is that? Well, you've got less technology on board. There are less moving components in a pure battery electric vehicle, and the cost of the fuel initially is a lot cheaper in the first place. We certainly say and try to advise people that if you are thinking of changing over to any of the later technology, if you do have a driveway and a household and you're not doing regular trips of hundreds of miles, then there aren't really too many excuses why you wouldn't make that switch. I understand other than sort of cost involved, they are quite expensive, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, then certainly a battery electric vehicle makes sense. But I'll cover a bit more of that in the future. So what we have at our workshops and why I got involved is we wanted to give that confidence that choosing this technology is actually a good thing to do, and we found and something that my company has never done, or in the 60 years that Cleevely Motors has been around, is to sell cars, and that's what we've gone into with EV. And we have a 4,000 square foot showroom at Lansdown Industrial Estate with various makes and models of electric vehicle, and we can source hybrids and plug-in hybrids as well. But we have when we have customers come in and want to know about electric vehicles, we soon find that in a brief conversation, it's not a quiz, we're not trying to convince anyone that a battery electric vehicle is the best thing to choose, but we soon find that in a lot of use cases, a pure battery electric vehicle can be the right choice when the majority of the members of the public we talk to actually overestimate the kind of mileages that they do in their vehicles and how they use it. So it's been a really interesting learning curve for us. Certainly in the 4 years that we've been running Cleevely EV, we've seen an increase in the amount of cars that are available. One thing, last year especially, there was a huge amount of pure battery electric vehicles new to the market, and something that we like to call of the second generation of cars. So when we first started, the cars were first generation technology. The first Nissan Leaf and Renault Zoe were actually out in around 2011. So 10 years ago now, electric vehicles were introduced into the UK's roads, along with a third make called that's a joint venture between Peugeot, Citroën, and Mitsubishi. Now they made a little time car that we use as our courtesy car if anyone brings their vehicle into us to be repaired, and we have a couple of varieties of those: a Citroën C0, Peugeot Ion, and Mitsubishi i-MiEV, that were the first sort of town cars that are available to purchase. We have one for sale in our showroom now that is £4,500, and that has a range of up to 50 miles. As I said, it is first battery technology, and but it has rapid charging on it, and certainly for my wife's use case, something like that would be perfectly suitable for her day-to-day use. We actually purchased a Nissan Leaf for her, so that was up until the Tesla Model 3 came out and about, was the UK's best-selling electric vehicle. They have rapid charging, they have home charging. So I'll cover charging very briefly because it can get quite complicated. But so there is home charging from a domestic socket, like you see the 3-pin plug on your wall. That's referred to within EV circles as granny charging. That's the slowest form of charging. That will add around about 9 miles of range per hour that the vehicle is left on charge. then you can have a domestic charging point fitted to a dedicated circuit on your circuit or circuit breaker on your consumer unit on your home electrics. That can be 7 kilowatts on its own ring main. That is referred to as fast charging, 7 kilowatts, and quite a lot of EVs have a 7 kilowatt onboard charger. That will add around 20 to 25 miles of range per hour that the vehicle is on charge. So by no means would you need to necessarily charge it, or I don't need to charge, or my wife doesn't even need to charge her car every day, even though her range is around about 70 to 80 miles in her vehicle. Her Nissan Leaf, going back to that, is a 24 kilowatt hour battery sized. And if you work on a variable of around 3 to 4 miles per kilowatt hour of the battery, you can see how the range kind of ties in then to around 75 miles times the 3 to 4. And then those vehicles that I've mentioned actually have rapid charging. Now, rapid charging are the public available charge points that are, say, 50 kilowatt hours upwards now, because technology has improved. You can actually have faster than that charging points, but some of the early technology can't handle that kind of capability. But even on the slowest of the rapids, if that makes sense, the 50 kilowatt charge points, you can get an up to 80% charge within half an hour. So I recently drove my wife's Nissan Leaf, which is old technology, 100 miles to Millbrook Proving Ground, and stopped once just to grab myself a cup of coffee, bit of a snack, went back to the car. We were nearly at 80% on a go with my journey, and it was nice and easy. I actually got to a charging point near a local Lidl, or the Lidl local to where I was at the time, and it was operated via a charge point. Some of the older rapid public charge points are operated via charging networks. So it can seem all very confusing, but the networks are starting to open up and things are starting to become a little bit clearer. But within a 20-minute, half-hour chat that I'm trying to give information over now, I can't go through all of how you operate things and whatever. But more than happy to broaden that if some of the questions come through on that. But the charging infrastructure is operated by networks. Those networks have their own apps or accounts and ways of operating them. So once you get your head around it, it was fairly easy. I can see a question coming in, but and I will answer it because it's important, about how reliable EVs are. And so as much as we opened up a garage and we're capable of working on electric vehicles, by no means does that mean that they are unreliable. They are actually far more reliable than petrol and diesel vehicles, having half as many moving parts. And one of the things that kills me every time I have to shout about it as a garage owner is that the maintenance costs on them are far lower as well. We don't try and pull the wool over anyone's eyes and inflate servicing costs just to create margins for ourselves. We are, and I can't stress this enough, and I try and get it into every talk, that our business is EV promotional first and foremost. And if everyone changed to electric vehicles and the roads were cleaner, then I'd consider that job done in my eyes. And if we didn't get as much maintenance work off the back of it, then so be it. Because but they do still need looking after, and that is important. But an annual service on an EV, it still has tires, it still has steering, it still has brakes and suspension, things like that all need checking. But there's no oil changes, there's no cam belts, there's no air filters, no spark plugs, things like that. So it's all a lot cheaper to maintain, and also a lot more reliable because there's a lot less to go wrong. I always get asked, and I think this is important to get in about reliability. I always get asked, so how long do batteries last? And that question we're still waiting to answer 10 years later. Yes, there are occasions where a battery hasn't been looked after, and that's part of what our company's advice is about: how to best maintain your battery, how to keep it in optimum performance. And basically, that's about not overcharging it, only charging when you have to or if you need to. And there's various stages of battery charging that you can go through to help promote longevity of your battery life. But the long and short of it is that they're fantastically reliable, and the batteries do last very, very well if looked after. The same as in your laptop or your phone or things like that. Alternative, comparable technology essentially is what we're talking about. Um, then, so I'm just conscious about the 25 to 30 minutes waffle on, but I will. So covered a little bit about batteries, covered a little bit about charging, a little bit about infrastructure, a little bit about range, and I'll cover a little bit about where we're going now, because we've seen, as I alluded to earlier, is that 4 years ago when we started this, there was far less choice of car, far less range available, and a lot less chargers on the roads. And what is absolutely fascinating me and delighted me in the last 4 years to see how a private sector has picked up on public charging, and that there are more and more charge points being installed all over the place. Then and also how battery technology has improved as well. So where I talked a lot about early EVs having only 50 to 100 miles of range, now having 100 to 150 miles of range is fairly commonplace, and having 250, 300 isn't out of the question. It does depend on the size of car you're after, the and the kind of journeys you do. As I said earlier, if you don't do regular trips of 200 to 300 miles, why carry that extra battery capacity? Obviously, if you need a certain car type, you may come with a certain battery infrastructure installed in it, but it doesn't mean it very much is a different way of thinking owning an electric vehicle. And although I have as I said, a 250-mile round trip tomorrow, I'm not rushing out there to plug my car in overnight and make sure that it's fully charged. I'll be able to get a charge and I grab a cup of coffee an hour into my journey, and then maybe the same on the return, and a 15-minute top up will be all I need to get home tomorrow night. And as long as I get home with, it doesn't matter, 15, 20% as the lowest level I'd like to run my battery to, then I'm perfectly comfortable with that, because I can plug it in my house, and by the time I wake up Friday morning, I'll know that I'll have sufficient battery capacity to complete the journeys that I have on Friday. So it's just a slightly different way of thinking, owning a battery electric vehicle. And the analogy that I use is, if you have a mobile phone and you're going to go out, and you know that you're not going to be anywhere near electricity during that day, you're going for a long walk in the woods or whatever, then you make sure your phone is charged the night before, so that you've got it if you need it. If you're going and you're going into work, or you're going out and you know you can plug your phone in whilst you're out and about, then you do that. And that's the way that most people work. And it's a different way of thinking, but it's the same with cars. No longer do you need to refuel to the top, just enough to actually last you the next journeys, or to make you feel comfortable is the most important thing. So I will answer some of the questions that are coming in now. So after Felicity's question, Steve's asked, how much does it cost to have a fast charger installed at home? It does depend. I mean, currently there is a grant available. I think it's £350 contribution towards having a charge point installed at home. It will depend on the location of your consumer unit at home. If, like mine, it's the other side of the front door, as quite a lot of homes are, obviously the older the home, the less they thought about things like that. But if it is somewhere near the front door and that's where you want your charge point, then it's just a case of routing it through the wall, and it may cost you around £500 or so. As a total, so 350 of that being the grant, and then you pay £150 on top. Um, One thing I did want to impress on everyone, or try a point I wanted to try and get across when it in regards to costs of EV ownership, is that really consider total cost of ownership. That's what we try and get people to understand. So I get it thrown at me all the time that EVs are very expensive, and yes, they are. Modern technology is expensive, and the cars, they should be cheaper. And what's keeping them high is the cost of batteries. So the cost per kilowatt hour, although it is coming down slowly, isn't coming down as much as it should. And also, the manufacturers are building in a buffer that allows them to continue to invest in research and development as well. So they keep the prices slightly overinflated, in my opinion. Might be a bit cynical of me, but that's my opinion. Where more than they probably could, just to make them slightly out of reach. Don't forget that the manufacturers have this 9-year window before they have to stop selling petrol and diesel engines. Now, to them, petrol and diesel engines have been their bread and butter for the last up to 100 years, depending on the manufacturer. So they're going to see a massive drop in how they can make money out of cars, and they've got to try and figure out where they can recoup these costs. So they're not as interested in selling electric vehicles as they are petrol and diesels, and making them more expensive to buy in the first place. We're expecting price parity, so the point where you could walk in to a car dealer and have a clear choice between petrol and electric, and potentially some kind of hybrid, to be maybe 2024 or 2025. That's the point where all of those fuel platforms will be the same sort of price, and then you get to choose which one suits you better. But we'll see how that one plays out. But total cost of ownership is a really important consideration. So yes, your charge point could be factored into additional costs of having that car, but where the fuel costs are so low as well, the maintenance costs are so low, and depreciation is a lot lower. So residual values of cars stay higher. Then if you're an outright purchaser, you've got that asset to hang on to, and there is a huge market for second-hand electric vehicles. In the fact that we're struggling to keep stock in our showroom fast enough and source older EVs to sell out to people that want to take their first steps, because there is such a high demand, and we've seen prices increase recently. So although we've owned my wife's car for the last 4 years, it may only have depreciated, I don't know, a few £1,000 from when we first bought it. It's crazy, some of the residual values, and so it's just driven on demand. I'll go back to the questions quickly now. How realistic is it to have an electric car if you don't have access to charging at home? I do know a few people, I mean, they're real EV advocates, so I'm not sure I like using their examples in these talks, but who don't have charging at home and purely rely on public EV charging infrastructure. I think that's fine if you've got charging infrastructure around you. Cheltenham is very poor, and as much as I've been banging on the door of Gloucester County Council and Cheltenham Borough Council, I do also side with them and think that it's not their responsibility to put charging infrastructure in. I think we didn't ask them to build petrol stations so that we could drive petrol and diesel cars around. So why are we asking them to put charge points in? These charge points aren't cheap, and they do need maintenance, and we all know that councils have no money. So I kind of don't think that's very fair to put on them. But what we should be encouraging is some private sector to come and bring charging infrastructure, and maybe support groups like community groups like the ones like this would be good to go out to some of those private sector companies and say, put some infrastructure in and we'll make the switch and they'll get used. But that said, there is an app for those app users, and also anyone that wants to check out the website, called Zap Map, ZAPMAP. So Zap Map will give a real-time indication of the location of local charge points, and also how operational they are, whether they're currently in use or whether they've got a fault and they're completely out of action. So there are charge points, there are rapid charge points in Cheltenham, and there are a growing number of them as well. And if you live, so at Charlton Kings, you've got an Instavolt off the top of my head at the petrol station on the name of the road escapes me, but there is an Instavolt charge point, and Instavolt a very reliable charge point provider. So to answer the question in a very long-winded way, it is realistic. It can happen if you make regular journeys where, for instance, you shop at Tesco's. Tesco's has charge points, so you could base your shopping and your charging around a once a week trip to Tesco's, make it a decent shop, get an hour's worth of charging in, or half an hour's worth of charging in whilst you shop. And if you have a 200-mile range EV and you're doing 200 miles a week, you're covered. You're done. So you don't necessarily need to worry about having charging infrastructure at home. If you have a lower range EV, then it becomes a little bit trickier. But with planning, charging it isn't something to get hung up on or to panic about. It can all be tackled. Let's move on. In regard to charging EVs, I don't have off-road parking. Yeah, I think we covered that one as well. Ken's question, do they have effective heaters for cold weather? So yes, it is a high voltage heater, so it will draw a couple of kilowatts off of the main battery voltage or the battery when it's running. And yes, range will be lower in the winter. But fuel economy is worse in the winter. It just nobody talks about that. So your petrol or diesel fuel economy is worse in the winter because it takes longer to warm the engine up and everything to become efficient. But that's never a talking point. But as an approximate range knockoff for if having the heater on in cold weather, you may lose 10 to 15% off of that if you like it nice and warm in your car. Obviously, it depends on the amount of journeys you do, the length of the journey you do. But one really nice add-on with electric vehicles are that a lot of them come with apps or preheaters that you can preset in the car. So my vehicle, and I'm very lucky to have a Tesla Model 3, which is the size of, I don't know, it's a saloon car that seats four and carries our family's rubbish around quite comfortably. That has an app, so I can wake up in the morning, open the curtain, look out and see it's frosty, and I just turn the heater on from the app, and the car will be defrosted. And if it's plugged into the house, it just runs off your house, doesn't degrade, doesn't take any power out of the battery. Off I go to work, smugly watching my neighbours scrape the ice off of their cars. And that's something that can be set as a timer in a lot of EVs. Or it can be controlled via an app on your phone. So as much as yes, you have a heater, there are ways around it that if you want to pre-warm the car before starting your journey and you have home charging, then that can all be covered as well and not knock range off of the battery. So how big would the battery be in the size of a Ford Focus, in the car the size of a Ford Focus? So my wife's Nissan Leaf is about the size of a Ford Focus. The older generation have 24 kilowatt hours. It's actually quite interesting, the Nissan's progression. So the battery hasn't changed size since 2011. Physically, it's the same dimensions. What it has changed is its capacity, such as the speed that technology moves on. So my wife's is a 24 kilowatt hour. From 2016, they moved to 30 kilowatt hour in the same size. Then in 2018, they made it 40 kilowatt hour in the same size. Now 40 kilowatt hours, good for 150 miles, something like that of range, which will cover a lot of people's uses. You can now buy both a 40 and a 62 kilowatt hour battery, which has best part of 200 plus miles range, which is absolutely fantastic. And and it's still within the same size of battery pack. So to answer the question, it does actually depend on the make and model of the car that you're going for. My car has a 50 kilowatt hour battery, and it does best part of 200 miles in the summer, slightly less than that in the winter, but it covers everything that I need it to do.
I've got a
Sorry,
question
forgive me.
for you, Matt.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, somebody's privately messaged me. Has a car been designed which is larger than a mobility scooter for two, with luggage space, nippy around town, fits into a small car park space on an estate? And will I be able to charge it from my home or carport?
Yes. So the vehicle that I referred to, that is our company car, the Citroen C0 or Peugeot Ion, that actually is a fairly dinky car, but it seats four comfortably. It has four full size seat belts. What we love about it is the back seats, the rear passenger seats fold flat, so the luggage compartment at the back is all completely one area, and it has a decent sized hatch, so it turns into almost like a mini van, but it's actually a very small car. Yes, it has a lower range, but if you're looking for a micro type car, then you're going to get a micro type battery with it, unfortunately. Um, I imagine that question has come from the fact that cars just seem to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And when I started doing this job 25 years ago, a Fiesta was a small car. Now a Fiesta isn't a small car anymore. So hopefully that answers the question. And it is old battery technology, but I'm struggling to think of anything more modern that is small.
No, that's fine. I know the person. It's on this estate on Charlton Park, and some of the carports are really small. They were built in the 1970s, so it's getting
Okay.
the car into that and getting able to charge it. So yeah, I think you probably answered that. But as you said, I think before is that if people want to know a bit more, maybe they come and have a chat with you, and you can actually show them in that, because this is obviously you're trying to describe it without us seeing it, so it's often
Yeah.
easier when you can show people. I
Yeah, I
think,
was
sorry.
Well, I was going to try and find a picture of it on my phone, but I can't find one quick enough to actually hold up to the screen and show you. But or not one that shows the scale of it anyway.
Yeah.
But shall I carry on answering
Yes,
some
yes,
questions, or
sure,
have you got another one?
absolutely.
Yeah. There's a question from Mandy about what to do when the battery runs down when you're traveling, and that is when things like Zap Map become invaluable when you're on the move. It'll pinpoint your location, and you can go onto the app and just see, oh, look, there's a charge point just around the corner or a couple of miles away. Go and get that, and you don't have to sit there for an hour. If you just need 20% to finish your journey off, just sit there for 10 minutes or something or equivalent, and rapid chargers will bang lots of power in there fairly quickly. On you go again.
Can I just interrupt? That was my question. And what I meant
Yeah,
was, does it ever run down? You're on the motorway and you haven't noticed, or does it give you warning signals that it's? And does it ever fail completely and there you are stuck? That's
I
really
was
what.
going. Yeah, I was going to go on to that because it is something that we get asked all the time. But yes, the same as you'd get a fuel warning, a low fuel warning in a petrol or diesel car, you get a low fuel warning in a battery electric vehicle as well. And we took part in a radio sort of game show the other week where I went, and that's why I took my wife's car to Millbrook Proving Ground, and we ran that down to zero. I started off with 20% in the battery, driving around a circle at 20 odd mile an hour, and after after 10 minutes, it dropped a couple of percent. It was ridiculous. So, because it was quite an efficient way of driving, so I had to burn some more off. But the point being that it will give you plenty of warnings, and yes, it will eventually stop, the same as a petrol or diesel car will, but you'll get plenty of warning up to that point, and you'll get told repeatedly. Then it'll start to restrict performance and power, maybe turning off some of the auxiliaries or the ancillaries that are running so that it can serve as much power as it can. So you get a fair amount of warning, and you'd have to be pretty daft to get it wrong, to be honest. is there a minimum number of miles you need to be doing to get the cost down per mile? About 5,000 per annum. That's a really interesting question, actually. And the answer is that no, not really. The cost is the cost. And I think all you're actually probably fighting against is maybe depreciation. Um, because if you're not if you're not using the car or not you're not wasting electricity essentially. So I don't think it really makes a huge amount of difference doing a limited amount of miles in it. Um, when it comes down to the environmental and carbon offset side of things, that's always a difficult one to quantify, I guess. But in the fact that you're not probably going to be keeping it and then just throwing it away once you've finished, it will have a resale value, it will have a continuation of its life, and it will continue to go on. Then, if you were to purchase a second-hand electric vehicle in the first place, then I think that would probably only maybe add to the economical value maybe over time, because it's just keeping an older EV on the road. How much more embedded carbon is there in an EV compared to ICE? That's a pretty interesting question too. I don't know the figures is the honest answer on that. But although the carbon footprint of an electric vehicle initially, because of the precious metals and materials within a battery currently, and I will say currently because I've seen some very interesting stuff about purely man-made batteries available very, very soon, is that so the interesting thing about the battery technology is that once that battery is made, if you are using green electricity to charge that battery, so off of your solar or from a green energy supplier, the curve of how environmentally friendly, if you like, that vehicle is really flattens off very quickly. Whereas with an ICE vehicle, you're continuing to put fossil fuels that have to be produced, that have to be made, that have to be transported, then get burned, just continues to add to your carbon footprint. Whereas an EV, it's not a linear curve; it flattens out relatively quickly. And I'm not going to guess at the figures, but I did see, and I don't know this, I can't remember the source, but it was something like, yeah, after 5 years, that an EV's carbon footprint is matched, if not bettered. Obviously, that will be hugely dependent on the mileage that is covered as well in the vehicle, and how that would offset about the amount of fossil fuels it would have been burnt if it had been a nice vehicle. Do they run very cold, say -10 or -15? Yes, yeah, of course, yeah. So batteries don't like being cold any more than engines do. However, they do. They're not drawing on. They're not drawing in atmospheric air. They're not running on that outside temperature as such. They're a sealed unit, and some of the newer and more expensive electric vehicles actually have internal heaters within the battery anyway. So back to my car again, because it's a good case in point. If I say that I'm going to leave at 7:30 in the morning to go to work, then my car will preheat its battery to make sure that it's a good temperature to carry on with its day. So yes, it doesn't matter on what temperature it is, it will run as efficiently as possible. As technology moves on, that will only improve, so that there's less losses from the battery if it's not plugged in at home overnight. So do you use much useful space in the car due to the battery? No. Batteries tend to be, because of the size of them and the weight of them, they're located in the floor pan area of the vehicle. So the passenger compartment area, from the bulkhead to the rear seat area, the batteries are under the floor. They're under your feet, so it doesn't take up any useful space. It actually adds to the driving performance of the vehicle, because it's a lower center of gravity. They're not one end or the other. They're central, and they're nice and low. And do they need a gearbox other than reverse? No, but they have a reduction gear and a differential. So there is an oil element in there that needs servicing every few years, every 30,000 miles or so. And they do have a neutral gear as well, so that you can knock it out of either drive or reverse, but they are just forwards or backwards. And that goes for hybrids as well as electric vehicles. So they are all automatic, and they're all forwards, backwards, neutral, or park are your gears that you've got to choose from. Is there a problem? So Jenny says, is there a problem with using the car battery to drive, but then leaving it for a few weeks if you're on holiday? Again, another good question. It is better to leave a battery at around 50 to 70% if you're going to go away on holiday. There will be what's called a vampire drain. So modern cars are made up of a lot of electronics that do need to stay awake every now and again. So there'll be a slight drain to things whilst it's just stood there doing nothing, but not enough to drain the battery out completely. The only reason I say to keep it a higher-ish percentage is just because a battery loves to be used, but if it's not going to be used, leaving it standing fully charged is about one of the worst things that you can do, because fully charged, it creates a lot of heat in the battery, and there's a lot of pent-up energy there, and it's not great for the battery to leave it sat there fully charged up. Moving on to Steve's question. I saw today that the Just Park app, which allows people to hire out their driveway as a parking space, now also allows people to hire out their home as an EV charging point. Yes, Just Park is one. There is also Co-Charger is another one, and PlugShare is another one. So there are apps out there available where you can actually turn your EV charging point into a source of income for your household. So you can rent it out, so Booking.com has also included for bread and breakfast and hotels and things the facility to be able to put on that they have EV charging points available to their patrons. So the world is becoming more EV aware now, and considerate as well. So it only adds fuel to the fire of choosing an electric vehicle in the first place, and when there's so much convenience being built into it as well, and making use of the technology that's available. Jenny's question, I love this question. Yes, and yes, the National Grid will be able to cope with all the vehicles are electric, and they are actively looking forward to it, and that's because electric vehicles help with spreading the load across the grid. So when I get home at 6 o'clock at night, I don't put my car on to charge, and there aren't many EV owners that do, because electricity is most expensive at that point in time. There is a massive load on the grid between 4 and 7 p.m. every day, and electric vehicles help spread that so that you can set a charging timer on your EV to make use of either cheaper priced electricity overnight via your utilities company that you choose. You can specifically get EV biased tariffs that have cheap electricity overnight between, say, 1 and 4 o'clock in the morning. Yes, the same way as not everyone goes to the petrol station at the same time, but I understand there are busier times of the day, and that only takes 5 minutes. There isn't the need for everyone to charge up at the same time, and I was on Octopus Energy's Agile tariff, which we would pay wholesale price for the electricity. That would be 30p per kilowatt hour during 4 and 7, but on, say, a very windy day or a very sunny day where a lot of the energy fed into Octopus's green energy system was actually there was so much energy they needed to offload it, and the wholesale price of electricity actually went negative. So there's a great game that you can play as an EV owner, that if the price goes negative, go and charge your car up, get paid to charge your car up. And I've done that a number of times. The only reason I say I was on Octopus's Agile tariff is because I'm now on the Tesla tariff, where they control my Powerwall, which sort of it just builds into this whole world of this mini ecosystem where my solar charges my battery, my car adds to that, my battery from my home feeds back into the grid, and Octopus have got control over that to help balance up the whole grid. And that's why National Grid are hoping that more people adopt electric cars, and they're perfectly capable of dealing with it all.
Matt, I'm going to stop you at this point because
Yeah.
you must be exhausted. I should think.
That's fine.
There's one statement left from.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I noticed somebody else has come on, but I saw Susan's came on, and it was more of a statement from her about her hybrid, and the 12-volt battery goes flat if it's not driven over 5-ish days. So I think I'll have a problem if I leave the car unused for 2 weeks. So I think that was something from Susan, and there's something here from Ken. If you want to have a look, and then we'll call it for tonight.
Yeah. Quick word of advice to Susan: probably worth getting that 12-volt battery checked out, or get the car checked out that there isn't some kind of drain, because it shouldn't go flat after 5 days. Ken's question: if there are several cars charging overnight in a road, could the electric infrastructure become overstressed, as this could be unusual significant drain on the electrical grid? From what I understand, talking to people in the electric grid, no, there should be plenty of capacity. A lot of the roads, depending on the size of the road, actually have 3-phase leading into the streets. And interestingly enough, my neighbour also has. So we're in semi-detached housing. My neighbour has solar, we have solar, and WPD, Western Power Distribution, come and split our houses supply up because it was linked, and there was the danger of so much solar being produced and being fed back to the grid that our particular link couldn't cope with that. But when I asked them about if my neighbour had an EV, would we both be able to charge, they said there's more than enough capacity to be able to cope with that. Drawing 7 kilowatts, it's 16 amps. It's not a huge draw anyway, so it's easy to cope with the infrastructure that we have. Yes.
Thank you so much. You've given us so much tonight. I'd just like to just before you go, and just to say, when we started, that we're going to try and bring somebody every month to talk to people, and we've got Dr. Peter Boyd coming on hopefully at the end of July to talk about local community and climate change, and he's a Charlton Kings resident and research fellow at De Montfort University, and he's been looking at low domestic energy for 20 years, and he's working with a Gloucester Community Energy Co-op at the moment. With Stroud District Council have agreed that the Gloucester Community Energy Co-op can go ahead with a project that'll provide heat pumps and PV panels and batteries to a group of 7 sheltered bungalows using current storage heaters and owned by the council. And basically they're going to form a relationship and work together so that they can purchase energy and do this as a collective. So he's going to talk a little bit about that hopefully sometime in July. We'll confirm the date and everything else on the website. But for tonight, really, thank you so much, Matt. You've covered such a lot of ground. If anybody, I think everybody knows where to find you if they've got any more questions.
Yeah, please do.
Yes, thank you again, and thank you to everybody for coming on tonight. I hope you found it beneficial, and you never know, I suspect you might be having a conversation with Matt or somebody of his ilk at some time soon.